Good evening, everyone. Hello, and welcome to A Hangout of Witches. It is Pi Day. It's the Grammys, night of the Grammys, but it's also the final episode of A Hangout of Witches Season 2. This is A Hangout of Witches at the Cool Table. We're going to be talking about episodes 9 and 10 of The Discovery of Witches. And we're so excited that you're here with us. If you're watching on YouTube, say hello in the chat. If you're watching on Twitter or on Facebook, hi guys, welcome to our show. We're just going to be chatting and discussing the final episodes of this season and how it pulled everything together and what threads it left out of the knot. So let's get started. I am Beth. I am the owner of the Cool Table, and I am drinking a Pinot Grigio like it's 2013. And that's the only thing I drink when I go out. Say hello to everyone. Jana, you go first.
Hi, I'm Jana. I'm just drinking water tonight because it's daylight savings and I got very little sleep last night and I have a sleep deprivation headache. So just water for me. Wah, wah.
Hey guys, it's Heidi. I am drinking White Claw like it's summer of 2019. And I'm excited to talk about these two episodes. I can't believe the whole season is done. And let's do it. How about you, Lachey?
Hi, everyone. My name is Lachey, and I am drinking a hard apple cider, my favorite. And looking forward to ending out the season.
Yeah, I forgot I muted myself. Yes, we are very happy that all of you are here. Hi to Emma and Brett and Shelly and everybody else that's watching online. We're glad that you're here. So let's get into it. This final episode, I'm glad that we're talking about them together because in both of them, we have a lot of like threads coming together. I know I said that kind of punny earlier, but I really mean it because we're getting a lot of goodbyes and the final moments for a lot of characters happen in these two episodes. Obviously the last one, but also in episode 9. So all of the little side projects that happen in this season, aside from the things we've already kind of said goodbye to, like the king, the emperor, and Philippe, those things all come to an end in these two episodes. So let's discuss them and see how we thought about them. So some of the finalities. Diana and her knots finally come together in some way. We get lots of goodbyes with Kit and Bess and Louisa and Gallowglass. There's a plan in the future of some sort for good old Jack Blackfriars. And Knox finally makes it to the compound. And everyone's in one place. It's Tour finally. Marcus is meant to protect everyone, but does he really? So there's a lot going on, and I need to put Heidi back in the chat. Hold up. There we go. So there's a lot going on. And what did you guys think of? Was there one character finale, or was there one thread of plot that you thought came together perfectly and you were super happy with how it ended?
I'll say my favorite scene from episodes 9 and 10 was Matthew with Elizabeth, like Queen Elizabeth's kind of goodbye. I thought their chemistry was amazing.
Oh no, hold on, sorry. I did not mean to not just knock you out of the stream. There you go. Sorry, Jana.
I'm back. As I was saying, I love the scene with Matthew and Elizabeth. I think they had great chemistry. It felt very layered. Like you don't know their history. I don't remember their history from the book, but you knew like they had it, a lifetime of some kind of relationship. I thought the actress who played Elizabeth was so good, kind of portraying her courage and her arrogance, but there was also a lot of vulnerability in her performance, and I just loved it. Like that was my favorite scene. And it was kind of sad that Matthew had more chemistry with Elizabeth than Matthew and Diana did. And not like sexual chemistry, just how they played off of each other.
Yeah, I think that scene was really beautiful. I think it was actually probably the best scene of these two episodes put together. It was really masterful. It was kind of like a dance. It was really painful and honest. There's a lot of pathos going on with Elizabeth being this like aging queen who is wondering what her legacy is going to be, wondering what's going to happen to her realm, and not knowing and feeling vulnerable. And, it just was this really gorgeous goodbye, and also kind of just this uplifting way that, she's scared and hurting, and he's able to soothe her both physically and emotionally and mentally. I thought it was very tender and very beautiful, and also beautifully set in this like round, whatever this room is that they're in. So it was a very gorgeous scene, and probably I think one of the most impactful of the season, really.
There was one part where the camera is kind of below Elizabeth and kind of like panning up, and she's got the collar and the music is just majestic, and I got chills. It was just shot so well. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like that is Queen Elizabeth I. It was perfect.
Yeah. And his dialogue in that scene. I mean, he's saying like the greatest monarch of British history or whatever. And she's just, uplit. And it's really, really great. Any others?
Well, I have to say, I guess throughout the entire second season, I just absolutely love Gallowglass. And, it's true in the books as well, but I just really think that, Stephen Creed just really did a fantastic job. And he turned out to be, the same as in the book, one of my favorite characters. I just loved him from start to finish. So.
Yeah, he's adorable. And I really wish that they had utilized him more. I felt like he wasn't the presence that he is in the books. He just felt like a little bit of a bodyguard. And he is more familial in the books. And he has a whole, like he's more, the relationships are more intimate. So I wish they'd been utilized more, because even at the very end when they're leaving, you can see his pain at having to say goodbye to Matthew, even though he'll see this other version of him, but especially having to say goodbye to Diana. Heidi, do you have something you want to say?
Yeah, except for I understand that he was calling her auntie out of respect, but every time he said it, like it got super cringe because he kept auntie, knowing from what you guys have told me what comes next just made it even weirder for me. But yeah, he was great. My favorite wrapped up story was Jack Blackfriar. Just kidding. It was not my favorite.
I was about to lose it on you.
No.
Like I'm still hot. Like I'm already hot.
No, my favorite was probably Isabeau. Her arc has been interesting this season, going from like what she always thought she knew about witches and what was right and how the world should work, and realizing through her grief and through accepting her grief that what matters is something different. I thought that was powerful.
Yeah, and they end the entire season on her face, which just gives you this idea that there's going to be something coming up in season 3 where Isabeau's going to just throw down. And even just the way she accepts Phoebe immediately and doesn't even turn around the dynamic of having Human there introduced as Marcus's partner into anything other than, I hope I don't disappoint. When she's this like Greek goddess, who's thousands of years old and has all of this, gravitas to who she is. And she just looks at Phoebe and says, I hope I don't disappoint. It was just a beautiful line. And it was well, and they had these great moments together. So yes, I think Isabeau's arc was also really, really great. Tell us in the chat if you guys have a really great goodbye that you liked. Brett said we get to see Benjamin. We do see a bit of Benjamin, this tiny little hint of Benjamin watching Domenico as he leaves. So much so that like, I think Heidi probably doesn't even realize that that's what we're seeing. Okay, so in episode 10, after Domenico comes up to the blood rage vampire and is like, what are you doing? Why are you obsessed with Matthew and Diana? What's your dealio? And he hurts him. Domenico recovers, and then he is going back into, I guess, his hotel or somewhere, wherever it is he's staying. And you see a man watch him walk up into that, and that man is Benjamin Fuchs.
And is Benjamin Fuchs the guy who was the sire of Father Hubbard? Yes. And
yes.
Was he also the man who was in Bohemia looking for them? Okay. But he's not the guy with the blood rage who attacked Domenico, or we don't know.
We don't know. This is the
Okay.
big mystery at the end of season 2, is that they had this blood rage vampire in Oxford. He stole the miniatures. He's obviously obsessed with Matthew and Diana. He attacks Domenico. He does all this stuff. And we still don't know who this vampire is unless you read the books.
I fully assumed as a viewer, I've just assumed it was that guy as soon as I saw him in Bohemia, that he was the blood rage guy. So I hope.
Especially because you see him do that to the guard in Bohemia. So it's a very safe assumption to say that it's potentially Benjamin. And then we see him in Oxford watching Domenico. So that is a very, very good assumption. In fact, it probably would be cooler if it was Benjamin. We're not supposed to know, essentially.
All right.
So there we go.
Do you want to discuss the Domenico attack later? Because I have a big question about that one.
Let's discuss it now. No, we're
Okay.
not going in order tonight.
Okay. So he recovered very quickly from his attack. Like he was healing relatively quickly. Why couldn't Matthew heal that quickly after his attack at the end of the first season? What was the difference?
Lachey, you want to take this?
Matthew's injuries were fatal. Like, well, yeah. So the attack that happened to Domenico, it wasn't like fatal. Like wherever he was injured, it wasn't like his aorta. It wasn't. It wasn't fatal. What? I can't even remember the vampire's name. Lord, I'm sorry. Juliet? No,
Domenico?
Juliet, the female.
Oh,
Juliet. That was it. Okay. She specifically meant to kill Matthew. She didn't want him to live if he wasn't with her. So, and apparently the vampire that attacked Domenico wasn't quite that, worried about that part. So that's the difference, basically.
Makes sense.
Speaking of that Domenico scene, there was a bunch of Twitter accounts, like official Twitter accounts, commenting on the hotness of that scene that I kind of
Really?
Yes. That like Domenico on the ground, all bloody. It was like AMC or Sundance or one of the official channels.
Okay.
We're like,
first of all,
that's hot.
Weird.
Disagree.
That's very weird. But also, I could barely see that scene. Like I was watching this in screeners on my computer, so maybe that's why. But like that whole segment of the episode was
very
black.
dark. It was very dark lit. Yeah.
And where were they? Were they in Matthew's like Tudor estate? Like I couldn't even tell what the location was. Like what house were they at?
I have no idea. I mean, he's looking at something that is Matthew's, I think, but I have no idea where they were. It would make sense for them to be in the lodge or whatever, because that's kind of near Oxford and it belongs to Matthew. But who would have any idea at this point where they were? I have no idea. So Shelley said, as far as endings go, I did tear up the whole last 10 minutes of episode 10, in spite of the fact that I give two shits about Jack. So let's talk about little Jack Blackfriars, because they want it to be a big deal. They tried really, really hard in these last 2 episodes to make Jack and his connection to Matthew and Diana something that pulls at our heartstrings. Did they succeed?
Jack was successful in making himself useful by stealing back the book. So like at least he had a purpose for being there. He stole back the Book of Life, or whatever it was called. Stole that back from Cecil or Sisler, whatever it was. And so that was useful. But as far as caring about him, no, I did not care at all about Jack Blackfriar. How dare they try to make me care about that kid?
But Matthew got to be a husband and father again.
Well, all the little, scenes, them stargazing and Matthew trying to teach, him different things, reading and about constellations. Yeah, that's cute. But no, not really. Because, you knew they were going to have to leave him eventually. There was just no way they could take him with them. So, yeah, what was the point, basically?
Yeah, I'm not very into Jack as a character. I don't even really think that he was a good kid for them to care about. Like he doesn't even have any like cute kid shit going on. So I don't know.
Does he come up again in book 3 as far as like his descendants being useful? Okay, that I find that more interesting. That makes sense.
Can we talk about the weirdness of Diana going to Father, whatever his name is,
Hubbard.
Father Hubbard, to take, and I don't know if that's in the book, but that just came across as so weird. Like Jack has been put in a good household, but she goes to like the king of creeps, Father Hubbard, and is like, would you please take care of this human boy? I'll give you my blood, even though I was strictly forbidden not to. That made no sense to me. Why does she do that?
I truly do not understand Father Hubbard's actual role in this actual season of television. So I get his role in the book because it's expanded and there's more going on. In this season, I feel like he is very extraneous, at some point an antagonist, and then he becomes an ally. And there is never a point where they recognize him as switching from antagonist to ally. All of a sudden, he's just in the dungeon with Gallowglass and Matthew, helping save Diana from Kit and Louisa. But really, is he there to restrain Matthew from hurting Kit and Louisa? It's a very strange relationship, and it's not explored enough for us to care. You know, there are lots of other things that happened with Father Hubbard in this particular season that could have been given over to a different character and made more sense.
I
don't
have
know.
to say, as a book reader, this was one of the times where I was just like, you totally screwed that up. I don't like it. You know, for the most part, I love the show. You know, I think that the adaptation has been great. You know, I really don't have much to nitpick. But that scene where she gave him that drop of blood, I was like, oh, why'd you even, you didn't even have to do it at that point. So
Dawn just asked, is Diana giving him the blood important in the book or in season 3? And I don't know. I don't think so. Lachey, do you remember if it has a point?
What I remember and what they did show, I guess, is that she didn't give him the most important information, which was the fact that she is pregnant with Matthew's child. That's a big deal even back then, because the species aren't supposed to mix. And in the book, the whole point is that it shows how she's cunning enough and how she's coming to her power enough to kind of outsmart him and not give him that information. And she did in the show. So I was like, okay, well, I guess if we're really thinking about it, she did what she was supposed to do. But I guess just the way that they did it, and the way that the show has been written so far, you wouldn't have gotten that without me sitting here explaining it to you. I don't think anyone really gets it. So
I mean, I've read book 2 and I don't remember that she was like pulling a fast one on him. But in fact, the fact that when she gets his drop of blood, we see all of this stuff from season 1 happening irritated me, because I thought that the heart vein scene should have been flashback into their lives. I mean, maybe that's the Twilight coming out in me, but I thought when Matthew bit her boob that he would have gotten like the full feeling of everything she's felt for him. And we would have seen lots of flashbacks from season 1. And instead we get that, but it's when she gives a drop to Father Hubbard. I get now that you said that they were trying to show that he got a limited amount of information. But there is no way that any watcher of the show, especially a casual watcher, and even me, a book reader, understood that she was doing that.
Right. In the book, he is only supposed to get her name. When it's done, he gets her name and that's it. And the fact that he got all the rest of these memories, and the fact, I guess he knew that she was a time walker, but the fact that he's seeing stuff, from the future, it was a lie. It wasn't correct. So
Brett says the way that she gave the drop of blood is the same as the book. I get that, but I just feel like there was.
Yeah, but they didn't show her freezing it. See, she freezes it so that for whatever reason, he only gets her name. And and it's a small thing. It's very small and probably hard to do for, all that they were trying to accomplish. So I'm not like really ragging on it, but yeah, it's still not what was supposed to happen. But then again, like I said, he didn't find out she was pregnant. So I guess, it served its purpose.
Yeah.
Yes.
But when is this woman going to figure out that she needs to stop telling everyone everything? When is she going to learn that? She's told everyone knows everything that Diana has going on. I did not understand how Matthew trusts her in any way, shape, or form at all.
There's a whole thread in this season where all of them are kind of giving away the goods, and it doesn't make any sense why the humans aren't more scared of them, why there isn't more witch hunting going on and things like that, because they certainly know what to who they are. I have no idea why. So let's talk a little bit about Goody and the final threads and this aspect of the show. What did you guys think? Did you think that the witchy stuff did it serve its purpose? Because I have very distinct feelings and I don't want to get into them because I don't want to color your thoughts. So what were your thoughts on all of that, whether it's Diana and threads or Goody or whatever?
I thought visually it looked cool, but I had no idea what was going on. Like, why does she need to tie 9 knots? What spell is she working on? What does a weaver really do? Like, it looked so cool, but I just had no idea what the purpose of it was. Like, why does she need to tie knots? And I've read too many ABO fanfics to not giggle every time I hear the word knot.
Okay, for those of you that are not aware of ABO, real quick, that's Alpha, Beta, Omega Fix. If you want more information, Google it at your own expense. Maybe not. Maybe don't Google it. But it's basically like wolf fic. And that's where the Alpha, Beta, Omega comes into. And nodding is a sex thing that they do. And it's weird. So
weird.
Jana, you need the new reading material. It's okay. It's all right.
Anyway, I didn't understand at all what she was doing and why she had to do it.
Yeah. What did you guys think, Shay, Heidi?
So Dawn just said it in the comments. She said the saying is at the end of each of the threads annoyed me, and the one that annoyed me the most was "knot of 7" and "it'll awaken." It doesn't even rhyme. All the other ones rhymed. Why they couldn't make it rhyme? But we have to talk about the most important thing of all from these last 2 episodes. And I forgot I was going to introduce myself this way. I was going to say, I'm Heidi, like Cora. It was awful, you guys. Cora. What was that? Make it stop.
So a couple of things. First of all, I think the knots were beautifully done, right? But why does it take Diana so long to make these knots if she's a weaver? If it's a thing she can do that other weavers can't or other witches can't, why is it so hard? And B, is this how all of her spells are going to happen in the future? Is she going to have to take a couple of hours before she can do something? Because that has not historically been how her magic works. C, or number 3, or whatever I'm using to punctuate these, she said she has to finish these 10 knots in order to time walk back to the present. She already time walked to the past. She has lots connecting her to the present, like her whole ass life and her family and her apartment and everything else that's there. And how would it be harder to go back than it was to go into the past? She already did that without a knot at all. So why is that the thing she had to do? And why the fuck would you go all the way back in the past to learn how to do some knots for a spell that you did to get you there in the first place? Shouldn't it have been that she was learning some kind of like bigger thing than the time walking spell?
Well, see, this is the thing. They condensed so much. Well, first of all, her learning the knots was supposed to be way more difficult than what they actually showed it to be. The fact that she took time and went to Bohemia and all this kind of stuff, and they didn't really show the passage of time and how long it was taking her to learn this stuff and how difficult it was for her, because it it was actually supposed to be very, very difficult for her to get it all and to learn all 10 knots. And I don't think that came across, the fact that she was already using magic, which is why I said in an earlier episode, her being able to kind of like show herself to Philippe and all this other stuff that she was able to do without having studied with Goody, beforehand, that just didn't make sense to me, because supposedly she wasn't able to do much of anything without being able to utilize her skill as a weaver. So that, I think they just wrote that incorrectly. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I thought it was pretty. I thought it looked nice. And everything. To your point, Heidi, I don't even know if they showed Cora to the effect that they were supposed to, although she was beautiful when they showed her. But, I think they just didn't have enough time. I think they didn't have enough time. So
I have a question about Cora. Is she a fire drake or a phoenix? Because it did not look anything like a dragon.
She's supposed to be a fire drake. She's supposed to resemble a dragon.
She looked like a dodo bird. She looked like a dodo bird. But
we did not even see, like, okay, so there's a part in the books where that Diana and Matthew are being referenced in this Book of Life, the book. Mm-hmm. They're being referenced. They're being referenced to the point to where the scientist, the one that they met at the beginning of the season, they never showed her again.
Oh, Mary?
Mary. They have her. She has this huge drawing of the fire drake and the serpent, I believe, or the Ouroboros or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. So that when you see it, you're like, oh my God, that's Cora. Mm-hmm. And that must be Matthew. And this, actually represents them. And they realize it. You didn't even see that part of it. I mean, there is a lot that is left out, that is cut out. And there's not enough exposition or explanation as to what everything means. And I think it's just because it's only 10 episodes, there's only so much they could do. There are certain points, I guess, of course, that they want to hit. And, that's what they did. So
I think that the imagery of all of the stuff that has to do with the alchemical part of the books is something that they should have delved in a lot more. And it leads me to one things that I really wanted to talk about, which was the Book of Life itself. So the entire reason that they go back into the past is to get this book and learn from it. And yet, the only thing we ever see Diana do is casually read it and stroke it and hide it under the floorboard. There's no struggle to understand it. It's not producing anything for her. It seems like when she had it in the present, it did more to her and for her than it did in the past. And so they went back for two things: for her to learn magic that she already knew how to do, and for them to read a book that she had more connection to and could read better in the present. So there was no point at all to the entire season if those two things were never fully delved into, especially the book. The book is essentially just as big of a prop as Jack's marbles. That's how often they talk about it. I mean, it's not a thing. It doesn't actually do anything. It is the opposite of Chekhov's gun. They never utilize it.
Yeah, I thought they were actually going to make that change. I thought that they were going to, because they kept showing it, and they never came to the part where they lost it again, because in the books they actually lose it again and aren't able to take it back, and that's how it ends up in the college and all this kind of stuff. But the fact that they kept it made me think, okay, so maybe that's a change being made, and they're actually going to take the book back, and that'll be something different, and we'll see where they go with it. And then Steven comes and says, you can't take this book back, and I'm like, okay. Now what?
Yeah. Yeah. Go, Heidi. What do you have to say?
If they had lost the book, or if it had been taken in some nefarious way, if the queen had kept it, that would have made way more sense. Instead, it took one conversation with her dad to be like, oh, you're right. We're going to give it back to Father, or to Mr. D or Dr. D or whatever his name was. And they're not going to bury it somewhere. They're not going to give it to Gallowglass to hold on to for the next couple of 100 years. They're going to give it back to the people who lost it the first time. I do not understand what they were thinking on that storyline at all.
I get the fact that he's like, this is a magical thing that you don't understand and you can't take it back. That's makes sense. But those whole conversations, she should have been struggling with the book. We should have seen her like cramming for the GRE with the Book of Life. She should have been just like doing everything she could to figure it out as quickly as possible so they could get back. It should have been this thing where they were like obsessed with it so that it could be something, or even if it wasn't that she couldn't figure it out, because like Brett just said, they can't utilize the book, it's broken. Wouldn't it make more sense then for them to be very possessive of it to the point where they are having it on their person all the time, or talking about bringing it, how they can bring it back to the future? And then the fact that Cecil goes and steals it would have been a much more potent scene if they were freaking out over someone stealing the book from them. Like, well, no, we have to bring it back with us. We can't understand it in this time, but we have the pages in the present. So we need to go marry the book with at least the pages that we have. And then, and then just like discussing how they're going to deal with it. I mean, it's the Godzilla of this show. The book is the catalyst that brings them together. It's the thing that they go back in the past to deal with. And yet, at the end of this season, they placidly put it back into the hands of the people that made it impossible for them to use in the present in the first place. It is really, really weak storytelling. With just a couple of tweaks, it could have been powerful storytelling. And so I don't understand. And if that's the way it is in the book, if it goes back to John Dee, fine. But sometimes when you don't have time to make something work, because you don't have pages and pages of narrative, you condense it into something that's more supportive of the visual medium that you're using. And yes, having Elizabeth steal it from them so that it does get back to John Dee, et cetera, would have made for a better narrative. Them freaking out about how to get it back to the future with themselves, better narrative. There's so many other ways to do it rather than Steven just being like, I'm your dad, it's got to go back. And it's so bland, and it makes the entire season, other than the detours with Philippe and things like that, really just the detours with Philippe, I can't think of anything else, and Meet Jack, it makes them totally, completely impotent in the arc of what they're doing and what's important. It's so disappointing. I don't know how else to say it. Anybody else got thoughts on the book?
I'll just say it was kind of weird to have the whole book arc come to a close by her dad just scolding her and being like, you dummy, you can't take this back with you. Which kind of leads me into Diana's whole relationship with her dad. If we could talk about that.
Real quick, I want to say something else. I want to say one more thing about the book in terms of that. Diana gives him like this, like, here's what I saw in the book. Like, she talks about the tree and all the stuff that she saw when it opened for her before it was broken, right? But like, as the witch that's learning her power, it would have been cooler if she had been learning spells that recreated what she saw. Obviously, she can make the Rowan tree. She can make Cora come out or whatever. Maybe she could recreate all of those visuals that she's seeing, or at the very least, I don't know, sketch them the fuck down. Something that just shows that the study of the book and the understanding of the book is paramount to them. Or maybe Matthew like does a lot of sniffing at the particles that the book is made. I don't know. It just, something isn't right. It's just not right.
Did the book get broken because they went back in time and upset Kelly when he was crazy in the cave? We don't know. Or so was the book unbroken the first time she saw it, and it is now broken because they went back in time?
No, it was broken when she very first saw it. So one of the very first things she jots down when she sees it at the Bodleian is that there are 3 pages missing. The thing that bugs me about that is that they look like they've been perfectly scalpeled out of the book, and he ripped them, and they don't have like these nice edges.
And no one knew, like Peter and Javert acting like they had no idea. Like, oh, we just found out Kelly had torn these 3 pages out. How after however many hundreds of years did you not know there were 3 pages missing that had been passed down into your creature dumb?
Because they didn't
Diana
know.
was the first person that was able to actually get the book in like hundreds of years. She was the first person that the book would come to because of who she is and, you know, what she is maybe as a weaver. I'm not sure. They knew of the book, but no one had actually seen the book before.
Yeah.
You know,
and I think that her reawakening the book made them realize the book was the thing that they thought it was. Like, it was just kind of like in lore that there was this first grimoire / book of life thing that might be, and they've all kind of tried to call it Ashmole 782, but just kind of poo-pooed it as something that's not real, right? So they're just kind of like, it's just legend until she reawakens it. And then they realize that it does have, she especially has something connected to it. And it does have, maybe is the thing that they've been looking for.
I'm sorry. I'm not sure if they've said this, and I hope it's not too much of a spoiler, but her dad did have the book before. So her dad was able to call it as well. And I think they showed like in the first episode that there was some writing in it. He wrote that, you know, he made an annotation in the book too. So yeah, it was called before. I guess they had seen it before, but I guess since her dad passed, no one else had been able to call the book. So,
because he spellbound it to Diana, he puts it back into the library to where it can only be called by Diana. So there's that going on. And of course, at this point, when he meets her in the past, nice little segue into what Jana wanted to talk about. When he meets her in the past, he hasn't seen the book yet. He hasn't made that annotation in pencil yet. So there is more coming. But again, this is all kind of the cool part, right, of the books, is all of this like travel through where the book has been and what they know about it and what works and all the alchemical drawings and how they relate to Matthew and Diana. And we're really not aware of that while watching the show at all. It just seems like superfluous to their story and loving Jack and getting together and Kit being in love with him. It's just like a secondary little thing. It's the little bit of lore that's underneath the surface. And it's not the main thing, where in reality, when you read the books, it's kind of the whole thing. And it's a much more of an interesting puzzle piece kind of story in that way. Anyway, you wanted to talk about Stephen and his coffee breath being introduced and what that meant for all of them. I love that, how he's like, I smell coffee. And I'd be like, actually, what you smell is coffee breath. But continue on, Jana.
The only thoughts I had about them was, I don't know if it was the actor playing Steven that I didn't like or how they played off each other, but it was just, I never bought them as father and daughter. And I think Emma said it. Oh, she really didn't like the scenes between Diana and her dad. It felt like it was lacking the level of emotion that should have been there. Yes, like I did not buy that relationship at all. Except for like right at the end, right before he leaves, when they're both kind of crying and he's saying, you're everything we dreamed you would be. But it was just weird. I didn't like it. There was like no emotion, no chemistry, no sense that they were related at all.
I think it's just the actor. I think he was just not up to the task. He just didn't seem like he was really there altogether.
He also just seemed mad the whole time, which I guess, I mean, she was young whenever they passed away. And so maybe they didn't know her. If I walked into my adult, he said she was 3 or 5 on her tricycle the day before he saw them. And so I don't know that I would have an emotional response to seeing one of my adult children. It would be a little off-putting if they were a child at home. But he did seem angry the whole time. Like, you are breaking the rules of time walking. How is she supposed to know the rules of time walking? No one was around to tell her. That was annoying to me. And then also where he was like, all these rules and I'm self-taught and I don't know how to do anything, but we prepared you. You became exactly who we prepared you to be. What preparation did you do, sir? That was strange.
Yeah, it was really weird. And I also found that, like, I don't understand how Anyway, Lachey, did you want to say something? I'll explain that in a minute.
Yes, I did, because this is the second of my moments with at least this episode. And I think for me, it might be the writers. I don't know if it's the actor. I think it's the writers. This character, while he's, kind of concerned, his personality is real fun. He's asking her, how she ends up teaching, at Yale, and, when he's a Harvard man, and, and asking her about baseball and all this kind of stuff in the books. And you didn't get any of his personality. We didn't get to see his familiar, which actually shows up in the books and everything. And is another thing, another way that Diana learns a little bit more about her familiar is the way he interacts with his familiar. He kind of helps her to loosen up and relax enough to learn the rest of the knots and stuff like that, even though, he is self-taught. That remains true. But his personality just did not come through in this episode. And it may be the actor. I think it's the writers, because I think that they kind of hamstrung Philippe in the same way.
He was very bland and unlikable as a character.
Yeah.
Not even like as Diana's father, just bland.
Yeah, I think it's both. Both they kept us from seeing more of Stephen, which we probably should have gotten. Instead of her doing so much thread work, maybe, she could have had some conversations with her dad, and also that the guy just kind of was not great. But I think it was just both. Therese says she completely agrees with you. And Dawn says, does she not react too strongly because she doesn't want to tell him he dies in her time? Yes. I think that he knows he's going to die at some point. Like, they've seen it, I think he says. But she doesn't want to tell him the particulars. And that makes sense. I mean, it finally, they care about changing something that happens in their future, right? My question is, do you think that you would recognize your children as adults if you only knew them at like 6 years old? Like, do you really think that if you had just seen your child at 6 and that's as far as old as they'd gotten, like my kids are older now where I think I'd recognize them as adults, but like, would you recognize Leighton, Heidi, if she was adult Leighton in your face? Or would you just be like, oh, that looks just like me?
No, I think I would recognize her if she started crying and refusing to eat dinner. Then I'd be like, oh, there's Leighton. I see her now. But no, I wouldn't recognize her just off the bat. No way. I would be super curious about her, though. And I think that I would be knowing that someday in the future we'll be separated. He says that we knew our time with you was short. If I knew my time was short with my daughter, with Leighton, who was 5, and then I saw her at 30, I would want like a total download of everything that had happened. And any way I could help her and prepare her. And that when Lachey was saying how fun he was and wanting to know about baseball, that makes more sense with whenever he kept saying like, oh, you're trying too hard. Like, you need to relax, like feel the notch, just enjoy it. That would have made a lot more sense if he was the type of person who was relaxed and was feeling things rather than being like, these are the rules. So,
yeah. We've never seen him be relaxed. We only saw flashbacks to him in the first season, and he was all stressed and doing spells and shit. So that's not really something that he's done before. That's just another way that they kind of, I feel like Philippe was better fleshed out in terms of the way he was in the book, but Stephen for sure was not. But at least we got him. They could have ignored it altogether, I think. And so at least we got that. I was cracking up because Matthew starts talking about how she needs to perfect her magic around the beginning of episode 9. And I was like, it's been 9 episodes. Perfect that magic already, Diana. Oh, man.
When, Beth?
Perfect that blood rage, Matthew.
Yes, the blood rage and the magic. It's just the constant in this season. And at the same time, they're not spending any time doing those things. Yeah.
Nope. A lot of intrigue, no magic doing, or no magic practicing or learning. She does magic somehow, no idea how she knows, all this stuff instinctually, but she's not like, or at least they're not showing her really practicing with the coven or, Even with any other witches besides Goody. I mean, so the water witch, the fire witch, the wind witch, none of them, really give her any pointers.
And none of them seem impressed with what she can do. If doing the 10 knots is so difficult, all of them are just like standing around in a circle, kind of looking bored. Like, here, find the energy. If that is so difficult, they should have been really impressed with the power that she had. I have a question though. Why wasn't she able to use her power in the dungeon with Kit and Louisa? Like, she had no magic all of a sudden. She couldn't pull this. Why couldn't her magic pull the gun out of Louisa's hand like it pulled the sword out of whoever it was? Was it Matthews? What happened?
She couldn't use her magic. She didn't know how to. She was still learning. Yes, I know exactly. It made no sense whatsoever. But the point is that she still wasn't proficient enough to do that kind of, I don't know.
Yeah, it's Emma just asked, how did they shackle her in the first place? And you guys, the only reason I'm not like pulling your names up across the screen is because my cursor's messed up and I don't want to accidentally leave check somebody out of the thing again. Can't see my cursor. Freaking MacBooks. But so I think that it's just so inconsistent. Like, what she could do in Philippe's office is a total 180 from what she wasn't able to do in that dungeon scene. In fact, she has to call on Cora and her phoenix comes bursting out of her heart or whatever. And it's just, and then she gets like vengeful and really like, I'm going to kill you in this. I'm going to tell you what your futures are, which was kind of cool. And then she just didn't bother with it. And let's talk about Louisa and Kit at this point, because I'm glad that we pulled back around to Louisa and Kit, but at the same time, their endings were so bizarre, and Kit especially deserved a better ending than crying Matthew's name while he is laying in the mud in the middle of Bedlam and Matthew ignoring him and just leaving. Man, that was cruel. What did you guys think?
Did Christopher Marlowe really spend any time in Bedlam, like in real history? Is that a thing?
I don't know. It would be interesting if he did. That would be cool, but I have no idea. I
do know. I think he was murdered though, because Diana says, I don't remember exactly how, but she says
in a tavern fight.
Their endings are violent and not peaceful. And I don't remember what happens to Louisa, but Kit does die
really
young.
Does. Yeah, he really dies in a tavern fight, like before before he becomes famous. Over the bill, a fight over the bill.
Over one of the earrings, probably. Did she write that sonnet for him then? Or was that something in his head that she was just magically knew from the future and he was impressed because he had written it in his own mind but not written it down? I was confused.
I think he'd already written it down. He had not shared it with anyone yet. So, but just the fact that she had that much of Hero and Leander memorized is one of probably the number one most unbelievable thing about the entire show. There's no way nobody knows. I mean, a few people know like the face that launched 1,000 ships, but that's about it when it comes to Marlowe. People do not memorize Christopher Marlowe, and she definitely wouldn't have because she's into alchemy. Why would she have memorized Hero and Leander? No.
I don't believe anyone anywhere can memorize that much poetry and just have it and recall it at will. I don't believe that's a real human ability.
I know a lot of poetry. I just want to say, I spent a lot of time in college memorizing poetry, but I still didn't memorize any Marlowe. Face that lost 1,000 ships. That's all I got. And Brett just said Kit Marlowe died in a tavern fight. Yes, see, I'm always right. What happens to Louisa? I don't remember what happens to Louisa. She's not a historical figure that I have in my brain. She's a fictional one from this book series that I didn't read very closely. So, Lachey,
she's sent away by Philippe. She does die. She is killed eventually. I mean, fatally. She's injured. I don't quite remember what it was. I know Philippe.
Could she be the blood raged person in the future?
She's already dead.
Not.
Oh, okay. So but as a viewer, I could possibly see that being the case.
You could, yeah, yes. Because they didn't give you her ending. So yes, there is a possibility that she will come back. But I believe in the book, they actually talk about her death, and I believe it happened somewhere want to say in the Middle East or Jerusalem or someplace like that, but I don't remember exactly. Yeah.
I agree that, I mean, I'm glad that she has like a violent ending because she's a terrifying vampire. Finally, again, like I said the first time, she's terrifying and she actually gets an ending worthy of a terrifying vampire, whatever it might be. I don't really like the blood rage thing that happens to Matthew in this episode. I felt like we already dealt with that. How many times is Diana gonna, sun's going down, buddy, to him? How many times is she gonna get rid of Hulk?
Oh, sorry, just to interject, Pamela says that she dies in the 1800s during a slave revolt in the Caribbean. So
there we go.
That's even better.
Yeah, it is. But yeah, like how many times is it going to be that Diana has to pull him out of the blood rage? I mean, I felt like we already dealt with it and we're dealing with it again. It was just a very unnecessary, the whole Bedlam thing was unnecessary. Anybody else? Any thoughts about Kit and Louisa?
I was surprised that Louisa convinced Kit to do the whole shenanigans because she thought that she was convincing him that Matthew would choose to be with him at the end, which I just want to go back to episode 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5, where I said that they have boned before. I rest my case. They have definitely boned before, or else Kit would not have been so convinced that would have worked. Thank you.
You're probably correct. He is very aware that Matthew is very into his D, and there's no reason why getting the switch away from him would not continually digmatize him, as it should have. Should have really worked. I agree. I just think his ending was so sad, just yelling out Matthew's name. Very, very, very sad. Made me cry. And here's another thing. What is Kit going to do when the real Matthew Royden shows up in a couple of months coming back from Scotland? So here's my next big picture thing. They don't deal with the ramifications of this moving back into the past at all. At all. Not one bit. Philippe doesn't step in and tell them what they're going to do. You don't hear that he's telling people that they're not allowed to talk about it. They don't say anything to Gallowglass except Diana saying, watch out for Matthew. Watch out for Matthew. Are you freaking kidding me? That's all already happened. What they need to say is, Gallowglass, remember, the next time you see Matthew, you didn't see me. Like this whole shit. Like Francoise and Pierre, like they're putting Jack in this house. Why? Because Jack can't tell anybody that they come into contact with, especially Matthew, who's going to come back, who he is and who they are and what has happened. None of it is discussed.
And isn't that house, like, don't they put him like one of the 4 or 3 that were there in the first episode when they first got to, so he's going to see him again. You're right. He's absolutely going to see him again. Yes.
They send him to Henry Percy's house. Henry Percy is the guy that he's talking to. I think maybe that's the other guy, but he's one of the Shadow of Night people that we see in the first episode. So yes, none of it makes sense. They don't talk to Father Hubbard about it. They don't talk to anybody that they have seen in the past about the fact that they have been there, but it has to be kept from the Matthew that's going to come back to London. It is bonkers. That's bonkers.
Also, that answers the question as to why she would have gone to Father Hubbard to look after Jack, because Jack shouldn't have gone to that particular house. Jack should have ended up elsewhere where he would not have run into Matthew enough to ask him, where's Diana? What happened? Why can't I stay with, all the things that a kid would ask, and so that's why she would have asked Father Hubbard to watch out for Jack, because she knew that old Matthew wouldn't have cared a lick about this little boy.
Yeah. And Matthew and Diana leaving Jack and him being distressed about Matthew and Diana leaving him is a plot point that season 3 is going to want to explore. And instead, we just get this kind of sad little boy and all this Cassiopeia nonsense and the marbles, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And no real sense that he felt abandoned by his adopted parents and that he would never, ever see them again. Or conversely, that he might run into a Matthew who doesn't know who he is, or who treats him like shit, or who ignores him, or who he sees from a distance as an adult and sees Matthew and thinks, there's my father. He abandoned me and he won't look my way. There are all of these threads that should have been, when Stephen says, you've been here too long, you've already affected the future, it should have been a bigger deal. And I wonder, there's the Book of Life, there's this aspect of the stuff that's happening and going on in the future. All of these things that we're talking about, Diana's magic, the way Stephen helps her with the magic, what she's supposed to actually be learning, and not just this one knot to get them home. All of these things that they should have explored more. And yet, what did they explore that took up all of the time that should have been the stuff they were exploring? Like we talked about this great scene with Queen Elizabeth. Good scene. Great scene. Nice scene. Was it necessary for the story that they're trying to tell? No. Do we need to see Cecil going through and getting all of their books? Probably not. Like, what are they taking too much time on that doesn't give us the meat of what's interesting about this storyline? And I don't know the answer to that.
And I didn't even consider all of those things, and you're exactly right. But in the future, Matthew would have knowledge of the fact that people were acting strange all those centuries ago. Like Cecil would be acting weird. Pierre and Francois would be acting strange. And there's no acknowledgement of that at all. It's so strange. Why didn't they, when they showed up in London, I know they showed up in the wrong spot. They meant to show up like out in the country or something. But when they showed up in London, why didn't he put on a disguise or go hide? Like, why didn't they hide somewhere? So strange.
Because she wanted to write a story where he was embroiled in what was going on in 16th century London. And I get that. But in the book, I feel like there is some management of what they have fucked up. They have fucked all these things up. And so they manage how that's going to work for Matthew in the past. And Gallowglass is a big part of that. And Philippe is a big part of that. But it seems as if it is completely, I mean, someone is going to be like, well, remember the conversation we had last week? And he's like, I wasn't here last week. You know, like I've had a goatee for the past 200 years. And I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, it's a totally different person. And it's totally bonkers that they're going to expect the past Matthew Royden to not know anything about Diana. So Therese just says, from a book perspective, he won't be going back to London or these settings for centuries. And there is a setup in the book about this. Awesome. Brett says, Deborah Harkness is a historian. She's compelled to tell these stories. I totally get it. Again, there is a semblance that Matthew Royden is meant to come back to where he was. So Kit would see him again, and Henry Percy would see him again, and Elizabeth would see him again in his real timeline. There was never a sense that if that's the case, like I don't remember this, Therese, so you're probably totally right. I don't remember this part. But if that's the case, that like he knew he would never be in London again for a couple of centuries, then that should have been in the forefront of why they went back to that night in 1590, because he knew that was a point in time where he left London and didn't return. That is not talked about in the show.
He even says, like, you'll have your Matthew back soon.
Yes.
To Elizabeth.
They did make it seem like old Matthew would come back to that particular place and time and interact with all those people. And you're right, Beth. They didn't do anything to say, okay, don't tell him. You know? Don't let on, don't tell him.
Especially because there are antagonists in his life there. I mean, what would Louisa have? What would Louisa gain by keeping it from him? She's going to have to be threatened to keep it from him. The same thing for Kit. They have to have some sort of incentive to do that. And there's no sense that that's going to be something that they're going to be able to do. And I have a feeling that when we get back to season 3 and it's fully in the present, it's just going to be forgotten. That's going to be completely blown out of the water. And we're never going to even get any kind of thought about it. But we talked about it too long. We have to keep going because a lot of stuff happens in episode 10.
We got to talk about the future, the present time.
We
For
do, but I
sure.
want to talk about the heart vein scene really quickly because this is a big deal in the book. And this scene felt very Shakespearean to me. It looked like a Romeo and Juliet, mutual drinking of the poison kind of scene. It looks like death. They're lying. The camera looks like it's laying there in a coffin. She looks super pale. So it's a very little death kind of scene, and I don't hate it, but it also is the Mind Stone thing where he's hooked from his forehead to her chest. That I could have done without with like an EKG/Mind Stone thing, but also like there's just a huge emotional moment of where this happens, where they see each other's memory, and it was just instead really fluffy, but also really silly. And
Why'd they look in pain? He looked in pain when she was doing, the witch's kiss. I'm like, is it supposed to be painful like that? Yeah. I'll go first and then y'all can do your thing. It was fine. It looked weird. I think they could have done better, but okay.
That was funny. So two things. They could have gone two directions with that. I barely paid attention to those scenes. I folded laundry and did not care at all. However, they could have gone hot, like where it was in the middle of sex and like where I'm gonna bite your heart vein right now. It's gonna be so hot. Or they could have done it like more in like a marriage vow way, like talking about how serious it is and that this is their real marriage, this is the real mating ceremony. Instead, it was like, I hear it's really sweet to take it right from the heart vein if you're mated. Like it was so awkward. It did not have any of the emotional gravitas that scene needed at all.
Agreed.
I thought it was super corny and lame and awkward and cringy, and there was too much gasping and they just did not strike the right mood for that scene. I don't feel like.
Think it could have been totally hot, like Heidi was saying, or even. I hate to bring up Twilight again, but like at the end of Breaking Dawn 2, where they're in the meadow and she puts her shield down and he sees everything, it's totally hot and sweet at the same time. Hot and sweet. Make it hot and sweet. Those are your two. That's the tone. Hot and sweet. I want to be horny and I want my heart to hurt a little bit. I want it to be sweet and really hot. It's not hard. Twilight did it.
Did we know the whole time that she had the capacity of doing the witches version, or was that just out of the blue?
Out of the blue.
Yeah. And how is that a random witch power she just knows how to use without any training at will?
I think at one point they say something about her having a third eye, like look at her witch's third eye or whatever at some point, and that's kind of related to the witch's kiss. But again, no exploration into the third eye, no exploration into what she's capable of doing, and we have an example of, a witch relationship in Em and Sarah, and yet they're not ever giving each other these witches kisses and learning about each other and all of that. So there's no precedent for this thing that she says that she knows about. And Brett just said, were they trying to look like they were coming? I mean, that's why I said, like, it looked like a death scene / little death scene, which is not that uncommon in paranormal fantasy shows and movies, but it can be done in a way that is sweet and hot. And it was neither of those things. It was just weird. It was just super
Matthew
weird.
just looked like he was in pain to me. I didn't read any of the rest of that into it. It just looked awkward and weird, and Diana maybe okay, but Matthew no.
Yeah, I really didn't like the Mind Stone EKG thing. That was really, really, really weird. So let's talk about the present. In episode 10, we get a back and forth between Septour and what's going on with Matthew and Diana in London, which is just terrible in episode 10. I mean, it's too much Jack, too much Cassiopeia. But Septour finally gets all of the good creatures in one place. So we have all the demons, and we have the good vampires, and we have Phoebe, and we have Isabeau and the witches. And they're in one place and they're meeting together. I love the scene of them at the table. There's just something like kind of cool about that. We talked about Isabeau's transformation into being somebody that's kind of like homey and welcoming to all these other people. We talked a little bit about Phoebe. What were your takeaways from those scenes? I mean, up to and including the ending where Knox kills Emily.
I liked how it looked like Phoebe was sitting in like a throne or a board seat, just like the rest of them, as an equal. That she was, even though she's not a creature, as a human, that she's an addition that can be added to the new covenant or whatever it's going to be. But the one scene, because I watched all these episodes twice because I couldn't remember what happened. Whenever she says that she's talking to Isabeau, and Phoebe says that the reason she's not scared is because humans are more powerful at discriminating, and that's scarier than vampires. And it was the weirdest conflagration. Like, they're vampires. They're scary. To try to act like that you've experienced humans that are just as scary as vampires was a weird thing that you tried to do in that episode. I felt like they were trying to say something that maybe they weren't prepared to say, and then they just dropped it.
Thoughts?
I love Phoebe. I thought she did great. I actually like seeing them all together. I like their future. Like, whenever they go to the future, I end up really enjoying like all of the interplay, even, when they're showing Peter and Jabir and all of them. I just really like seeing them trying to figure out what's going on. And I find it more interesting than all of the stuff in the past, actually. So I really enjoyed that part. I actually was happy that, for the final episode, they kind of did the back and forth thing. I like that too. And I was really surprised that Peter was able to do so much at Septor.
Yes.
Like, he was there for so long. That was just...
He's got his little spell box.
Yeah, his little fidget cube is very powerful.
What that was too. The fact that he was able to like immobilize and put Marcus to sleep. Like, what? And no one else noticed. So Isabeau didn't hear that. Martha didn't hear that. And none of the rest of the vampires and Septors, heard what was happening, or heard maybe that M was in distress. That kind of threw me. But I did still enjoy it. I thought it was, pretty high stakes, and I like that. So
it did seem weird that M didn't wake up to it, because they made it look like even the baby witch sensed something amiss, and that was why she was up and crying. But M sleeps through it all, and it seems like just another attack on M's character. Like, poor M. Wait, no. Sarah?
Yeah.
Got them confused. I've been talking about Sarah this whole time. An attack on Sarah. Sarah just can't do anything right, apparently.
I mean, I think that Sarah's kind of bumbling throughout the entire season. She's not really competent. I mean, we've talked about what it looks like when she fumbles her way into Smoky Rebecca like a big dummy. And it's just like, who would do that? She's not really there. Why are you trying to hug a ghost? But so I think that she's meant to be it's kind of sad that she's so half-witted in this season. When I think in the first season, she's easily frustrated, but she's not stupid. And she's not incapable or incompetent in the kind of magic that she does. But in this one, it seems like she does nothing this whole season except complain about what Emma's doing. So, yeah.
But see, they could actually make something of that, because the whole point of Diana having to go back to the past to learn magic is because witches of the present are weaker. They're not as powerful as the witches were back in the past. So if the writers wanted to, they could actually, work that in, especially with Sarah and the fact that Diana was raised by Sarah and M. But apparently M has some, type of magical ability, at least with the dark magic. She's still able to do that. It doesn't seem like Sarah can do as much or much of anything. The writers could take advantage of that. They could write that in. They could say it's because of this or that. they haven't
Yeah.
done it. And I think, it's probably a moment that they missed.
Yeah. They did talk about a little bit when Em and Sarah are talking about how Em and Rebecca used to go off and do some of the higher magics, and Sarah always felt left behind. And that's kind of a nod to that type of theme. But even the idea that Rebecca was particularly skilled at it, or that she was so much more advanced even than Em was. And so Em always felt like she was playing catch up, or even what Em is trying to do with all of these seances and scryings or whatever, she's trying to get to the level of what Rebecca was capable of doing, and she's failing. And that is what they're doing, but it doesn't really translate perfectly to this is why Diana wouldn't have been able to do anything, because she's raised by these witches who are fairly inept. And then contrast it with Satu, who barely shows up, but with Peter especially, who's super powerful all of a sudden, got his fidget cube that he could just turn and like totally rule the world with this thing that doesn't really, they haven't really explained what it does. But also he's incredibly, incredibly powerful. And we don't see a lot of that until this episode. I mean, he does do other things, but the idea that he's contrasted with what Em and Sarah are able to do. Em, for instance, magics the page away, and we don't know where it is, and he can't find it. So that's something that she's capable of doing that he can't just get out of her without killing her. I think it's better in this way. This is what the show is better at than kind of the other stuff, the Book of Life stuff and the stakes in the 16th century and all of that. This stuff is a little bit better developed.
Did we know how much of a prophetess that Rebecca was, or how much of the future that she could see? I know that she told stories to them about like the Shadow Prince and whatever it was, Diana, but whatever they called her. And so we knew that she had seen things, but the way they talked about it, with the way that Stephen talked about, like they knew they were going to die. Then she shows up in this stuff. She's very powerful. Did we know that based on the show?
I don't feel like we know that. I don't feel like it's particularly evident that she's, other than the fact that they killed her and that Peter was wanting her. It seemed almost like Peter wanted her because he just liked her, not that he was trying to get her power.
I was also confused by just a second. I was confused by what why she was looking for Diana. I know that they were worried about where they had been, but it had only been a couple of days. Like, why was she so concerned that she was willing to dive into dark magic, and why she was willing to get up in the middle of the night and walk out there under really sketchy circumstances and cross the lines that Isabeau had put? Why were they so concerned about speaking to Rebecca about Diana?
I think in the early episodes of this season, she talks about how the book and some of the feeling, like what Philippe is doing, the stuff that I think that the things were feeling off for her. So it wasn't just that she went into the past and things were fine and they were just hiding out, waiting for them to get back. She was feeling like, for lack of a better term, a disturbance in the force. And so she was trying to figure out what was going on, because there was more, obviously, something big was happening. So there's that going on.
And what were Em and Sarah doing with the page from the book that they had, the witches page? They always had it out, but either I wasn't paying attention or never really caught what they were trying to do with it.
I think they're trying to get it to give them some information. So they're either, they're chanting over it. They're, trying to get it to give them some sort of idea of what they need to do with it, or where to find the rest of how can they use it to be helpful to their cause.
How can they help Diana and Matthew? Like Beth said, maybe by the time they get back, they'll have more information, or maybe they'll be able to find the other two missing pages, or, whatever. So.
Yeah.
It would have been cool to see the parallel of like Diana struggling over the book with Sarah and Em struggling over the page.
Yeah, absolutely.
That would have been a poignant connection, I feel like. Because I guess the present wasn't as interesting for me, because I was still like, I don't know what they're doing at Setors. There's a page. There's a lot of
Yeah.
candles.
Yeah,
Sarah keeps
everything
messing
that's-
everything up.
Everything that's connected to the past would have been cooler if they had juxtaposed it with exactly how that affects the future. But they never really did that. But those are always the most interesting parts of what they're doing. And would have been cool if they did it a little bit more. I totally agree. So how do we feel about how they ended the season with M's death? I mean, in case you can't tell, she's not coming back. M is dead. So, I mean, is that a spoiler? She's dead.
I figured she was dead because she said you're going what's her name? Diana will avenge my death. But then whenever Sarah came running up, she was like, wake up, wake up, wake up. So I thought, because he says that whole like sleep. And then the other guy fell asleep. And so I thought maybe she was in some weird magicked sleep. But if she's dead, and that was like the big reveal of this finale, they failed that big time.
Maybe they want to start the next season with the emotion of her death. But I mean, if you think about the way season 1 ended with them taking that dumb step, it's kind of like also pretty dorky. But like, so it's kind of like just kind of falls a little flat in the same way that the season 1 finale fell a little flat, even though it's like cool, they're going out in the past, but it just like looks weird. It's kind of like that. Like M died in this horrible way, and Peter Knox, did it and ran away. And M magicked the page away to where we don't know where it is. Matthew and Diana are going to be traveling back to the future. That's the ending, but it is kind of a dorky way to do it. I mean, I would think that Sarah finding her wife or partner dead in the middle of an ancient temple after all this season she's been telling her not to do dark magic could have been super emotional and very, very, a big way to end a finale. And it did kind of fall a little flat.
I was really shocked when it ended just with the shot of Isabeau, and it kind of went through everyone. So maybe they were going for the feeling that it's like the calm before the storm or the deep breath before the scream. But it was, I don't know if it felt passive or just flat, but it was a choice.
Yeah. Passive is a good word for it. Everyone's just kind of quietly, passively waiting. Even Matthew and Diana's traveling to the future, the last shot that we have of them is him shutting a door to their bedroom. It's a very passive ending when the reality is our main villain just killed one of our main protagonists pretty violently, and her partner came across her dead body. That's huge plot-wise, and yet it still feels very quiet.
I just don't understand how Peter put Marcus to sleep. I mean, witches are supposedly afraid of vampires. So, and I know Peter is, very powerful. I get it, and I know Marcus is younger. I get that too, although he is like at least 200 years old. But I don't understand how he just put him to sleep like that and just was able to get away. I know he's supposed to get away for story's sake, story purposes, but I think the way that was written just made absolutely no sense. I would have liked it better if Marcus had come running upon M and with Sarah, maybe, after Peter had gotten away. That would have made more sense than him just putting him to sleep and, Marcus going, and all that. That just, that didn't work.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that Peter has been in this very magically dense place for a while. He's calling them out there or whatever, and he's kind of soaking up the elemental magic of that goddess temple or whatever. So maybe his power is like supercharged because of where he is. But that's just a speculation based on like, surely there's some reason he's able to do this thing. And also he is the witch who killed other witches. I mean, he's been, someone who has proven himself to be fairly powerful for a while. But all by himself, it seems crazy to me. The fact that Marcus is incapable of, even affecting a blow to him seems ridiculous to me.
Or that Isabel and Martha and all the rest of the vampires at Septors that work with Isabel or live there would not have heard M's distress, Marcus's distress or a sense that something was not quite right, especially with the baby crying. The baby was crying. So everyone around there was up at that point, you know, because the baby was crying so much. So the fact
Isabeau
that
was wide awake in her office.
No one felt anything, noticed anything, sensed anything, you know, was wrong, was not quite right, you know, enough to investigate at least.
Yeah, there's a lot in terms of why it's so quiet and simple of an ending when it should be pretty, you know, pretty crazy. I want to talk about this series as a whole, or as this season as a whole, and kind of give like my final feeling about it. So there's a realism to the books and the historicity of kind of the second book, especially, and the second season. That lends like the magic elements, kind of like the gravitas. And we've talked about this a little bit with like the Book of Life and stuff like that. But it makes shows like The Vampire Diaries or Charmed or something like that those shows lack, right? So like the fact that there's historical figures and the fact that they're in the 16th century and the fact that this is about like vampire DNA, and there's just something about the way the books are written, the realism that they're steeped in, that makes them not your regular, like just paranormal fare, right? Like the vampires aren't like the Vampire Diaries vampires, right? There's just more going on, even though that has history in it or whatever too. But when the real life threat is like passed over a little bit in service of like set dressing or cool moments with historical figures like the one with Elizabeth or whatever, it kind of splits it into two separate shows, which is what we're talking about, like why the present is more interesting than the past stuff, because there's the historical drama and then there's the paranormal fantasy. And the historical drama loses a lot of its interesting bits because they aren't upping the stakes of it. They're just getting to the plot points of the historical drama part instead of giving us really, really great stakes. So like Kit's jealousy, you know, is barely scraped by, you know, in a tunnel. Matthew sees him in a tunnel on his way to Elizabeth and he's like super mad at him for asking about Diana. It's like this, it's barely a moment, when those are some of the biggest stakes of the historical part of this drama. And it's barely scraped by. Or the witch being tortured. They talk about Agnes Sampson being tortured and killed, and that the witch hunts in Scotland are upping, but they just mention it instead of it being something that they show us that raises the stakes of the historical part of the drama. Jack's destitution. You know, we talked about Jack a whole lot and his like abject need for a protector. All we know is that Matthew like grabbed him off the street. He could be anybody. He doesn't even really look like much of an urchin, but like give us more about what's going on with Jack historically that makes it important to the paranormal fantasy of what's happening. The book scenes and stuff like that. You know, the heart vein conversation would have had more gravitas. Like if it seemed like Matthew literally wouldn't be able to stop doing the blood rage thing unless he bit her in the boob. Like, I have to do this thing or this is going to keep happening over and over again. And instead, it just seemed kind of like a sexy thing that he kind of didn't or did want to do. You know what I mean? Like, it just wasn't, it didn't have gravitas. It wasn't like all of these times I've had blood rage. Okay, there's this one thing I can do that's going to make that stop, because then I'll be able to see your thoughts and a possession thing will kind of go. So I just feel like the show is split between what it was wanting to be, which is a paranormal fantasy that has like puzzle pieces that meet in this one big legend of Matthew and Diana's love, and the really cool historical drama that we get to see with all this other stuff. And it's not good as a historical drama. The stakes of the historical drama are not there. And so it's almost, it just loses the puzzle piece mystery paranormal part of it, because it's doing all of this fan service to historic, you know, history buffs. And that's where it falls apart. And so I really almost wish that season 2 didn't exist, despite the fact that it's beautiful and we get introduced to characters that I really like and there's storylines that I really like. We can talk about how the whole arc is not necessary. We can talk about how nothing really happens that impacts the difference between the end of season 1 and the beginning of season 3. None of it's really going to matter a whole hell of a lot, except, Benjamin, Jack, all, and this stuff. And you just want to scream like they couldn't get it together because the mystery part was foregone in favor of the historical part. And so when I look at season 2 as a whole, that's how I feel. Like it's 2 separate shows and they weren't capable of bringing the historical drama into the puzzle mystery in a satisfactory way. That's my thoughts. You don't have to have thoughts like that. I could have just written that as a post instead, but instead I just felt like I would tell it to all of you.
I still like the show. Everyone knows by now, or you should know, I am a stickler. I'm a book reader. I like for things to be as close to the book as possible, understanding that they can't possibly put in every single detail, in 10 episodes. Yeah. It's just not going to happen. So given what they tried to do, I think they did okay. I wasn't like so disappointed. I just think that the things that they tried to focus on, they focused on the wrong things. So this goes back to what Beth was saying. I think that they pulled out the wrong parts, at least in the past. I loved all the stuff in the future and the present, I guess. I thought that was great for the most part. I didn't have any issues. And, like I said before, the stakes seem higher in the present. But, in the past, I think some of the characters did not come off the way that maybe I saw them in my head or the way that they came off in the book, in the pages and everything. Thought they could have done better with that. I think they focused on the wrong plot points. I think a lot of things that they try to do didn't make sense. It just, it didn't make sense for what they said maybe an episode or 2 earlier and everything. I think, whose responsibility is that? Is that the showrunner then?
Oh, sure.
Because I think, the showrunner needs to do a better job, at keeping everything consistent. If they say that, she needs to go back to learn this, then dang it, I need to see her struggling to learn it. I need to know why it's so difficult. And I need to understand why she can glow for Philippe, or bring Cora out to save herself, but she's still struggling to bring these threads and stuff to, and why they can't go home
Philippe,
yet.
But she can glow for Philippe, but she gets shackled by Louisa.
Yeah, why, it needs to make better sense. I think the showrunner, the writers need to do a little better job. But all in all, I still think for, a historical kind of fantasy, science fiction, and I still like it. I love the actors, and everything. It is still a great show, I think.
Heidi, Jana, y'all have any final thoughts?
Final thoughts. I remember at the end of season 1, I was thinking, this is a really good show that's kind of held back by the acting. And now at the end of season 2, I'm like, this is a pretty good show that's held back by the storytelling. Like the acting has gotten better, but it's like every episode you have these head scratching moments, and not in a good way to where they're setting up these great mysteries and questions. It's more of, they are not explaining things well. I don't understand why they're doing this. Lots of things aren't paying off. And I get that it was a huge, complex book that they had to break down into 10 episodes. But much like with Outlander, you just are left wondering why they're making the decisions they do and having so much fan service, which detracts from the emotional stakes of the story.
Yeah.
So, and people are saying in the comments, like, you just didn't feel emotionally connected.
Sure.
Other than the first episode, I did not feel emotionally connected to Matthew and Diana's relationship. I had so many questions about how things worked that were never really fully explained. So it's like, yes, I like the show. I like watching it, but I don't feel I should be left feeling this cold and confused.
Totally. Heidi?
My final thoughts are that it's a really fun show to watch if you have 3 to 4 book experts to ask all of your questions to.
Thank you for that succinct answer. It's very true. And here's the final thing I will say, and it's positive. I was looking at the titles today as I was watching, like the title, and it's gorgeous. They put all of this sciencey stuff in with the history stuff, and it's just this really, really great like title sequence. And it is a beautiful show. And if you are a book fan, it is a beautiful adaptation of a book that you love or a book series that you love. The head scratching moments and the things that don't make sense, you can put to the side because you get moments with the characters that you already understand and know that are really great. And I can think back on things that have happened in season 2 that I'm like, oh, I'm so glad I got to see Matthew Good do that. Or I'm so glad we saw Gallaglass do this one thing, But at the same time, as a show all on its own, there are emotional stakes missing. There are too many questions. And the storytelling doesn't overcome the aesthetics. So that's my final word on it. I am so glad that you guys joined us. Thanks to Lachey and Jana and Heidi for talking about this show with me tonight, but also to Andy and Courtney and Karen who talked about it with us over the season. Thank you to all of you that have been in the chat with us, especially those of you that have been here every week. We love each and every one of you. And we hope that you guys will join us. We are going to be talking very soon, within a week actually, about the very first book in the Shadow and Bone series called Shadow and Bone, for the Grisha series that's coming to Netflix in April the 23rd. We're also going to be talking about book 3 in the Bridgerton series, Benedict's book, which is the worst one. And so that chat will be really fun because that is a terrible book, but has hot moments. So it's hot and bad, which is just the perfect sweet spot in how we want to talk about a romance novel. So please join us for those talks. If you haven't subscribed to our podcast, the Cool Table podcast, please do so on whatever, thing that you listen to podcasts on. If you don't listen to podcasts, let this be your first one, let it be your first one. And we will be here talking to you about all of those things very shortly and other things. So thank you guys for joining us. And we will see you soon for Grisha Book Club and more Bridgerton Book Club.